Good afternoon, everybody. It's Steve Lookner with Right Side Broadcasting coming to you with a news alert. John Conyers, the Michigan congressman who is currently being investigated by the House Ethics Committee for accusations of sexual harassment and misconduct of his staff and also misuse of public funds, he has stepped down. Just in the last hour, he's announced he's stepping down as the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. He is the highest ranking Democratic member. Of course, the committee is Republican controlled because the Republicans are the majority in the House. But John Conyers is stepping down as the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. He is not stepping down from the committee. He is not stepping down from Congress, but he is stepping down as the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. There is a statement he released. I'm going to read that to you, and we're going to catch you up on some of the news today, including also the Nancy Pelosi interview about John Conyers a little earlier this morning that got a lot of press and a lot of people were talking about. So but we also want to take your comments on this story. So if you want to write in during the broadcast, you can write to me here, and I'll read your comment on the air. You can write to me on Twitter at Lookner, at Lookner. So let me just make sure we're all working here. Got to take care of, okay, that looks good. Let me make sure you can hear me. Looks like you can hear me. Wonderful, fantastic. All right, let's begin by talking about, let's see if I can get you that. Well, I'll show you the story, and then I'll see if I can get you the Conyers statement about this. So as you can see, it's in the last hour. It's in the last hour. This is a story from AP. Conyers says he's stepping aside as the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee amid a congressional investigation into allegations he sexually harassed female staff members. In a statement Sunday, the 88-year-old Conyers says he denies the allegations. So he does deny the allegations and would like to keep his leadership role on the panel, but he says he cannot in good conscience allow the charges to be an undue distraction to his House colleagues while the investigation is continuing. The House Ethics Committee is investigating Conyers after receiving allegations of sexual harassment and age discrimination involving staff members, as well as using official resources for impermissible personal purposes. So if you recall, I believe it was last week it came out in BuzzFeed News that there was a settlement in which John Conyers' office paid a staff member who had complained about harassment, and they had paid this staff member, and as part of this settlement of the harassment allegations, the staff member had to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and there's been some controversy about this, and BuzzFeed News also reported that there several of John Conyers' staff members had given signed statements to the body that oversees allegations. What's this called? I can't remember the body name. I'll have to look that up. But there's a body, that the official body that is the body you go to if you work in Congress and you have a harassment complaint. You go to this body and you take it up with them. Several of John Conyers' staffers had given sworn statements to them, and among the allegations they made were that he asked his staff members to participate in sexual activities, his female staff members, also that he used public funds to fly in women from around the country who the staffers thought he was having affairs with, which would not be an appropriate use of federal funds. He is accused of these things. The House Ethics Committee has said they're beginning an investigation on John Conyers, but just today, in the last hour, he has said he is stepping down as the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. Let me see, I want to try to get you his statement here. Give me 1 second here and I'll call this up. Shouldn't be hard to find, I hope. Here it is. So here's the statement from John Conyers. It says, after careful consideration and in light of the attention drawn by recent allegations made against me, I have notified the Democratic leader of my request to step aside as the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee during the investigation of these matters. So he's only stepping aside during the investigation, not permanently. I guess he's leaving it open to take his position again. Now, it's a little hard. I might have to do a little screen capture here. Hey, where's that? All right, hang on a second. Can I make this smaller here? Here we go. He also says, I deny these allegations, many of which were raised. Ooh, here it is. This is better. No, see, it's not. I'm not getting a good. Here it is. Here's the statement here. There it is. Posted by Elizabeth Landers. He also says, I deny these allegations, many of which were raised by documents reportedly paid for by a partisan alt-right blogger. I very much look forward to vindicating myself and my family before the House Committee on Ethics. Now that's a little, he says there, many of which were raised by documents reportedly paid for by a partisan alt-right blogger. He might be referring to Mike Cernovich. Is he saying Mike Cernovich? Well, it's a little confusing because he's saying these allegations, many of them were raised by documents paid for by a partisan alt-right blogger. Mike Cernovich, that kind of makes it sound like Mike Cernovich paid for the documents to be made, but the documents are documents that were statements to the committee that oversees harassment allegations in Congress. That's a public body. So he certainly didn't pay to have them made. Whether or not he paid for those documents to get those documents into his possession is irrelevant to. I mean, that doesn't. Again, just to clarify, whether or not Cernovich paid for the documents to get a hold of them, even what he's not saying is that. No, I don't think anyone thinks that Mike Cernovich paid these documents to be made, because they were made when people gave statements to this House, to the committee that oversees these investigations. Anyways, the statement continues by John Conyers. To be clear, I would like very much to remain as the ranking member. There is still much work to be done on core concerns like securing civil rights, enacting meaningful criminal justice reform, and protecting access to the ballot box. These challenges could not be more pressing in the face of an administration that cares little for the rule of law and a president whose actions and conduct cheapens our discourse every day. But I've come to believe that my presence as ranking member of the committee would not serve these efforts while the Ethics Committee investigation is pending. I cannot, in good conscience, allow these charges to undermine my colleagues on the Democratic Caucus, and my friends on both sides of the aisle in the Judiciary Committee in the House of Representatives. I am proud and fortunate to be a part of a legacy of more than 50 years of fighting for civil rights and making our country more equitable and just. I will never allow that legacy, a legacy I owe to my father, John Conyers Sr., who integrated labor unions, or my two amazing sons, John III and Carl, and my loving wife, Monica, and the extraordinary people of Detroit, to be cast aside or these causes to be in any way diminished. I am grateful to my colleagues who have called for due process before weighing judgment. I would urge them to continue to do so for any member accused of wrongdoing. Basic fairness requires no less. So that is the statement from John Conyers. I'm going to retweet that statement because I hadn't retweeted that yet. So that's what John Conyers said in his statement, where he announced that he is stepping down, at least during the House investigation into allegations of sexual harassment and misuse of public funds. He says he's stepping down as the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee during that House Ethics Committee investigation. He did not say he's not stepping down from Congress. He's not stepping down from the committee. He's stepping down as the highest ranking Democratic member of the committee, just to be clear on what he's stepping down from. And again, I want to point out just one thing I found a bit confusing in this statement is he said, I deny these allegations, many of which were raised by documents reportedly paid for by a partisan alt-right blogger. Now, to me, the only accusation he could realistically be making so the alt-right blogger, I believe, is Mike Cernovich. That's my guess. The only accusation he could reasonably be making of Mike Cernovich is that he paid to get access to the documents, because these documents, what is the name of this committee? I want to call up the name of this committee so I can get it right, because I keep saying that this committee. House Committee Investigates Harassment. Let's see here. It's not the House Ethics Committee. See, now I'm just getting lots of results about House Ethics Committee. Congress Office Investigates Harassment. I can't find it. Anyways, maybe somebody in the chat room might know it. I can't. Office of Compliance. Office of Compliance. So these statements that BuzzFeed published and that supposedly that BuzzFeed said Mike Cernovich gave them. Mike Cernovich is a conservative, you could say right-wing journalist / blogger. Mike Cernovich, when he gave the documents given to BuzzFeed by Mike Cernovich were statements to the Office of Compliance, which is a public body, which is the official body that investigates complaints of harassment and discrimination and other complaints of that ilk in Congress. So the only realistic accusation he could be making here is that Mike Cernovich paid to get a hold of these documents, but if that's the accusation, I don't know why that would make the documents less credible, because the documents already existed before he paid for them. Now, when he says this, though, it's this kind of odd thing because, he says, well, the documents were paid for by a partisan alt-right blogger. And I think what he means is that Mike Cernovich paid to get access to these documents. But when you're not specific about it, one could read this, if they don't know the whole story, they could read this as, a partisan alt-right blogger paid for these documents to even be made. And that's not the case. So to me, I don't know if it's intentional or unintentional, but what we have in this statement, when he says documents reportedly paid for by a partisan alt-right blogger, that sounds to me like an attempt to discredit the documents. And I don't know, given that the only paying that seems to even possibly could have gone on realistically is if Cernovich paid to get access to the documents, that doesn't undermine the credibility of the documents at all. By the way, I haven't heard other reports that Mike Cernovich paid for these documents, but maybe he did. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But my point is, the documents are the documents. The documents are statements to the Office of Compliance. So if somebody pays for those documents after those statements are made, that doesn't undermine the credibility of the documents. But if you don't get specific about it, like John Conyers does here, I don't know if this is intentional or unintentional, but it seems to me this wording is trying to suggest that the documents are less credible somehow, and I don't understand how, even if Mike Cernovich paid for these documents, I don't know if he did, but even if he did, I don't know how that would make the documents less credible. Anyways, that's just one thought I have on this statement right here. Would like to get some comments from you guys on this. What do you think about John Conyers stepping down as the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee? At least he says he's stepping down during the Ethics Committee investigation into his alleged sexual harassment and misconduct. You can write to me at @Lookner on Twitter if you have comments. @Lookner on Twitter. Give me a shout at @Lookner on Twitter. Also, if you do enjoy this coverage, I turned on the TV probably about a half an hour ago. Because we were going to come on air, and I wanted to see what the coverage was of this in the mainstream media. I looked at CNN, I looked at MSNBC, I looked at Fox. None of them were covering this. None of them. Maybe they're covering it by now. I don't know. But we thought this was an important story. We wanted to give you full coverage of it. But if you like that we're doing full coverage of this story, even on a weekend, sometimes the mainstream media networks, it's weird. Like it's night or the weekends, like they don't cover as much breaking news, which is very odd to me. I don't understand why a multi-million, hundreds of $1 million or billion or whatever company can't hire people to work in the nights or weekends. But anyways, if you like that we're doing this coverage, please consider making a donation, because we are viewer supported. We can only bring you this coverage thanks to your donations. Your donations keep us on the air. If you want to donate, you can go to the bottom of the YouTube chat and click on the $ at the bottom of the YouTube chat. There's a little $ there, or go to rsbn.tv/donate, rsbn.tv/donate. And thank you to the moderators for moderating today. The chat rooms in the YouTube chat, we got Jan and Lynn Jean and JC and who else? So that's who I see for right now. And we have Common Sense and Glenn O on the website. And before we get to your comments, which I'm going to get to in a second, I want to talk about one more aspect of this story, which is I was wondering, I don't know if you guys all heard about this, but there was a Nancy Pelosi interview on Meet the Press this morning that was kind of controversial, where Chuck Todd, the host of Meet the Press, was asking Nancy Pelosi, one thing he said is, do you believe these accusers? And she seemed to, she called John Conyers an icon. She was calling for due process for John Conyers. So I guess, some people thought she was being too defensive of John Conyers. and not supportive enough of the accusers. Now, some people, I'm sure, would just say, well, no, she's calling for due process, and what's wrong with calling for due process? But let me at least, but again, this was a controversial interview. A lot of buzz was going on about it on social media this morning. I want to show you a clip of that real quick from Meet the Press. So hang on a second here. So this is the Meet the Press clip of Nancy Pelosi. It's about a minute and a half long. It was posted by Meet the Press. Let me play this for you, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. And what I was wondering is it possible that when this clip got some blowback and some people started criticizing Nancy Pelosi, I saw a lot of mainstream media journalists who are not right-wing journalists, mainstream media journalists criticizing Nancy Pelosi for this. Is it possible that the blowback from this morning's interview with Nancy Pelosi on Meet the Press resulted in pressure on John Conyers to step down as the ranking member today, just so it would take some of the, was Nancy Pelosi getting a lot of grief, and she was just like, look, we got to take some action here, John Conyers, you got to do something to show, that we're doing something about this. So let me play you this interview clip. Hang on one sec. Hopefully this works. Let's try this.
You said there's now a zero tolerance.
Yes.
John Conyers, what does that mean for him now?
Let's say
in or out?
We are strengthened by due process. Mm-hmm. Just because someone is accused, and was it one accusation? Is it two? I think there has to be. John Conyers is an icon in our country. He has done a great deal to protect women, Violence Against Women Act, which the right wing is now quoting me as praising him for his work on that, and he did great work on that. But the fact is, as John reviews his case, which he knows, which I don't, I believe he will do. I believe that he will. Excuse me, may I finish my sentence? Sure. That he will do the right thing.
And is the right thing what? Resign?
He will do the right thing in terms of what he knows about his situation, that he's entitled to due process, but women are entitled to due process as well.
But he took advantage of a situation where he had the rules of Congress, and I know you guys want to change these rules, but he got to hide his settlement. He got to, his accusers had to go through all sorts of craziness. So why is he entitled to new due process in this case?
No, we are talking about what we have heard. I've asked the Ethics Committee to review that. Yeah. He has said he'd be open. It will cooperate.
Do you believe the accusers?
Review. Excuse me?
Do you believe John Conyers is accused?
I don't know who they are. Do you? They have not really come forward. And that gets
so you don't know if you believe the accusations?
That's for the Ethics Committee to review. But I believe he understands what is at stake here, and he will do the right thing.
So that was an interview, which was a controversial interview with Nancy Pelosi this morning. By controversial, I just mean that there was a lot of debate about that and some blowback for Nancy Pelosi this morning after that interview. And she said that John Conyers deserves due process, and I think that doesn't seem unreasonable to me. But the more controversial thing she said is we don't know if there's one accusation or if there's two. So, if you look at the BuzzFeed article, for example, it's pretty clear about what the various accusations are and who made them. So, saying, and also she said, what did she say? Something like, I don't know the case or something. I'm not familiar with the case. And Chuck Todd pushed back on that. Let me see if I can find it here. Hold on one second.
Right thing.
And is the right thing what? Resign?
He will do the right thing in terms of what he knows about his situation, that he's entitled to due process, but women are entitled to due process as well.
But he took advantage of a situation where he had the rules of Congress, and I know you guys want to change these rules, but he got to hide his settlement. He got to, his accusers had to go through all sorts of craziness. So why is he entitled to new due process in this case?
No, we are talking about what we have heard. I've asked the Ethics Committee to review that. Yeah. He has said he'd be open. It will cooperate.
Do you believe the accusers?
Review. Excuse me?
Do you believe John Conyers is accused?
I don't.
What? Resign?
He will do the right thing in terms of what he knows about his situation, that he's entitled to due process, but women are entitled. He did great work on that. But the fact is, as John reviews his case, which he knows, which I don't, I believe he will do. I believe that he will.
Yeah, so she says in the interview, as he reviews his case, which she knows and I don't. So it's a which he knows and I don't. And I don't know what she's really saying. It sounds like she's saying she's not familiar with the ethics allegations case, which is, it's a little confusing because there was a big article about it in BuzzFeed News. So BuzzFeed News, she should know at least that. And that was several days ago. So it's a little confusing that she says she doesn't know about his case. And also, she's not sure how many allegations there are. And there is this settlement that was made between Conyers' office and the accuser who worked for him in Congress. And this is the majority leader saying that she doesn't know how many allegations there were, and she's not familiar with the case. Now, maybe she meant to say something else. So I saw that being talked about a bit. Also, the thing about, do you believe the women? At the end, let me just play this clip again.
The ethics committee to review that.
Yeah.
He has said he'd be open. It will cooperate.
Do you believe
with
the
any
accusers?
review. Excuse me.
Do you believe John Conyers is accused?
I don't know who they are. Do you? They have not really come forward, and that gets.
So you don't know if you believe the accusations.
That's for the ethics committee to review. But I believe he understands.
So, and this was a bit controversial too, and. I guess, one argument that I heard some people make is saying, well, we've heard Democrats say that, that women should be believed when they make these accusations. For example, like some people have said this about the Roy Moore case or about the Harvey Weinstein's case. And I heard some people saying, well, if Democrats say this, then they should also be willing to say they believe the accusers in the John Conyers case, which she would not say. Now, I'm not saying what, look, there's an argument also to be made for accusers are accusers, allegations are allegations, and they all deserve to be investigated before you believe anyone. I mean, personally, I think you should believe only, you should form your beliefs only after a thorough investigation of whatever you're, deciding what to believe in. But I'm just talking, as I mentioned, I'm going over this because this was controversial, and I did hear people a lot of the criticism of this interview I was seeing this morning was like in the mainstream media. It wasn't like right-wing press or anything. So this was a controversial interview by Nancy Pelosi this morning with Meet the Press. And coincidentally or not coincidentally, John Conyers, about only an hour or two after this interview, announced he was stepping aside as the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. So I was just wondering, is there any connection possibly between Nancy Pelosi does this interview, she gets a ton of blowback on it on John Conyers, and then Conyers 2 hours later or within 2 hours says, I'm stepping down as the ranking member, at least temporarily stepping down as the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee during the investigation. Someone might say that's a way to have it look like they're doing something where he's not permanently giving anything up, and then Nancy Pelosi can say, well, see, something's happening on this. I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm just saying that's something that could have happened. I would also like to show you some of the tweets I saw about Pelosi, about the blowback she got. So this is Laura McGann. She's an editorial director at Vox.com. Vox is not a right-wing site, but Vox, she came out a few hours ago, and she said, when Nancy Pelosi isn't even on your side in a case where the perp is 88 years old and in a safe seat, why on earth would you report sexual harassment? So Laura McGann was upset at Nancy Pelosi for not taking the side of the accusers in this interview, I presume, because she sent out this tweet right after this interview. And again, she's at Vox. She's not at a conservative site. Elise Jordan. Now, Elise Jordan, she is an MSNBC political analyst, and she does not like President Trump. I've seen her. She does not like President Trump. She said this morning, Nancy Pelosi's interview with Chuck Todd this morning is a devastating showpiece of our era's bipartisan moral blindness. Dems had an opportunity to lead on sexual assault and are completely blowing it. I've seen a number of people on the left saying or in the center saying Democrats, well, actually on the left, I saw them say this morning, look, the Democrats are giving up the moral high ground on sexual harassment with this Pelosi interview. I'm not saying what I think about it. I'm just saying she was getting a lot of blowback from people on the left, not even people on the right. So again, I just wonder if she gives this interview on Meet the Press, about the Conyers stuff, and she defends Conyers. You can read it how you want. Won't commit to believing the accusers. How you feel about that is up to you. But right after she gives that interview, she gets all these prominent people in the media criticizing her, and then within 2 hours, John Conyers says, "Well, I'm going to step down as the House ranking Judiciary Committee member." Is there a connection between those two? I don't know. Could be. Just something I was wondering. All right, I want to take your comments on this story. Write to me on Twitter at Lookner. We're going to take some of your comments now at Twitter on Twitter at Lookner at LOOKNER. Let me know what you think about John Conyers' announcement that he is stepping down, at least during the House Ethics Committee investigation. He is stepping down as the House Judiciary Committee ranking Democratic member. He says he's stepping down during the House Ethics Committee investigation. They are investigating him for accusations that from his own staff members that he sexually harassed female staff members and that he misused public funds. For example, there's an accusation that he used public taxpayer funds to fly in women from around the country who his staffers believed he was having affairs with. So we're gonna keep covering this, but I want to get to some of your comments here. Let's see. So Matt writes in. Let's see. Hold on. My microphone's in the way. Here we go. Let's do this. Matt says, I believe in innocent until proven guilty. But if the Democrats are going to say Roy Moore needs to drop out over allegations, they can't say their fellow Democrats are entitled to due process before they'd have to resign. The establishment take us all for fools. It's time we put an end to this BS. So Matt, you're saying your problem is with the inconsistency. You think there's inconsistency because you think, look, Democrats are saying Roy Moore should pull out of the race. A lot of them are saying that, and a lot of the media is saying that. But at the same time, Democrats aren't saying John Conyers should resign. For example, Nancy Pelosi certainly did not say that this morning in the interview. So why aren't they being consistent? Now, and now somebody might say, look, be consistent and say Roy Moore shouldn't pull out of the election and that John Conyers shouldn't resign. Or you could say that they both should do the same thing. But your problem is you feel that there are being two different standards applied here. Thank you for writing in. Cutter Wayne Leaf says, is he an icon? I hadn't heard of him before the allegations. I believe John Conyers is quite well known for his civil rights work, but I'll call up real quick here. Now, of course, remember, the civil rights stuff he's probably most famous for happened, 50 years ago or so. But hang on a second. Okay, I have his Wikipedia page up here. Well, he's one of the 13 founding members of the Congressional Black Caucus and is considered the dean of that group. Actually, now, is that the main thing? I have to do some more reading on this. There's all this different stuff here. I don't know if this is like the main thing he's known for in terms of civil rights stuff, that he's the... Hang on a second here. By the way, he first assumed office in 1965, and he was born in 1929. Yeah, so after serving the Korean War, Conyers became active in the civil rights movement. Let's there's that. And then he co-founded the Congressional Black Caucus in 1969 and established a reputation as one of the most liberal members of Congress. Okay, I would have to, for the civil rights stuff, it doesn't talk about much here. I have to go back and do more research on that. But there's a little bit of biographical information. Thank you for asking that question. Cutter Wayne Leaf, I got to do some more reading today. I appreciate it. Lori DC says, Conyers needs to resign, period. Karen L. Berry says, the information, the accusations against Conyers were from a complaint from a settlement in 2015. The former employee said she was fired for turning down Conyers' sexual advancement. And if you want to read, if you want to read specifically about those allegations against John Conyers, I would suggest reading the BuzzFeed article. It lays out what it says. It says it got a hold of these documents, which were signed statements to the Office of Compliance from various staff members of John Conyers, and it talks about the various allegations that they make against him. So you can go read this whole thing. I'll give you a couple of them just to summarize. And she there was a settlement. She signed a settlement with Conyers' office, and she got more than $27,000, but she had to sign a confidentiality agreement. I just want to show you some of the, In her complaint, the former employee said Conyers repeatedly asked her for sexual favors and often asked her to join him in a hotel room. On one occasion, she alleges that Conyers asked her to work out of his room for the evening, but when she arrived, the congressman started talking about his sexual desires. She alleged he then told her she needed to touch it in reference to his penis or find him a woman who would meet his sexual demands. And then there's also one affidavit from a former female employee says that she was tasked with flying in women for the congressman. One of my duties while working for Representative Conyers was to keep a list of women that I assumed he was having affairs with and call them at his request, and if necessary, have them flown in using congressional resources. A second staffer alleged in an interview that Conyers used taxpayer resources to fly women to him. The employee said in her affidavit that Conyers also made sexual advances toward her. So if you want to read about the different accusations made toward John Conyers, you can read them in this BuzzFeed story. She said a powerful congressman harassed her. Here's why you didn't hear her story. Let's get some more of your comments on this story. If you have comments on this story that John Conyers is stepping aside as the ranking Democratic member on the House Judiciary Committee, give me a shout on Twitter at Lookner, at Lookner. And somebody made a donation. I forgot to say thank you. Oh, did it go by? I think it was Timberlab. Timberlab made a donation, and I don't see your comment, Timberlab, anymore, so I can't read your comment anymore. I'm sorry. But thank you, Timberlab, for the donation. We are viewer-supported here at Right Side. So unlike a lot of the mainstream media today, we are giving full coverage of this. As I mentioned about half an hour or so ago, I turned on the TV, and none of the mainstream media news channels were even covering the story live. So we're covering it live. We're giving you a chance to speak out about it. So if you like our coverage, you can donate to us and support Right Side Broadcasting because we're viewer supported. Your donations keep us on the air. So if you want to donate and support Right Side Broadcasting, go to the bottom of the YouTube chat and click on the $ at the bottom of the YouTube chat. There's a little $ there. Or you can go to rsbn.tv/donate, rsbn.tv/donate. Also, we come on the air at all times with breaking news videos. So if you want to know when we're coming on the air with our videos, subscribe to us on YouTube and click the notifications bell so you get notified when we're coming on the air. I want to get to some more of your messages now. Gary Crunk says he thinks that John Conyers' statement was meant to discredit the reporter blogger. So, as I won't go all over all of this in detail. Let me pull up that statement from Conyers today. But in case you missed it, the part that Gary Crunk is talking about is in Conyers' statement in the second paragraph. He says, many of the allegations were raised by documents reportedly paid for by a partisan alt-right blogger. And I believe he's talking to Mike Cernovich, who BuzzFeed News says supplied the documents to them so that they could write this article. The thing is, though, I haven't heard any kind of compelling evidence that Cernovich paid to have the documents made. That's not the point, because these documents were all signed statements made to the Congressional Office of Compliance. So if it's now maybe he's saying that Mike Cernovich paid for the documents to get access to the documents, but if that's the case, it doesn't undermine the credibility of the documents, because the documents were around even before Mike Cernovich paid for them. But I've seen no compelling evidence that he even paid for access to them. But even if he did, that shouldn't undermine the credibility of the documents themselves. But what I was saying, and what Gary seems to be agreeing with, is when Conyers says in his statement, documents reportedly paid for by a partisan alt-right blogger, if you don't really know the story, you might think it sounds like Conyers might be saying, oh, he paid for these documents to be made. It's sort of like Conyers doesn't use specificity in the paid for accusation here, and by not being specific, he allows people to misinterpret what he's saying in a way that might cause them to have less credibility in the allegations because they misunderstand what's really going on here. So it's sort of like, I don't know, it's either intentional or unintentional, but it's kind of like strategic ambiguity by the John Conyers statement. By not being specific, it allows some readers to perhaps make an incorrect interpretation of what Conyers is saying. It's kind of this sort of a language game to deceive. Now, maybe this wasn't intended, but that's how it strikes me. Let's see here. Queenie writes in, this doesn't surprise me at all. You have to understand the Democrats' oppression Olympics. As a white guy, Al Franken is at the bottom. So you think Al Franken is being treated worse by Democrats, it sounds like, than John Conyers? Is that what you're saying? I see. Sorry, I made a mistake. So just to be clear, this wasn't a reply to me. I had retweeted a tweet before, which I'll show you now, which Queenie was replying to. So let me get clear on that. So the tweet I retweeted was this one. Jonathan Adler, and I retweeted it because I agree with it. The Conyers allegations strike me as far more serious than the Franken allegations, and yet they seem to be receiving a tiny fraction of the coverage. That's not to say the Franken allegations aren't serious accusations. The point I think Jonathan Adler is making is that the Conyers allegations include, in addition to sexual harassment, they include misuse of taxpayer funds. And Jonathan Adler is saying, yet they seem to have been getting a tiny fraction of the coverage. And I totally agree that there's way less coverage of the Conyers allegations than the Franken allegations. And Queenie's response to this, my retweet, doesn't surprise me at all. You have to understand the Democrats' oppression Olympics. As a white guy, Al Franken is at the bottom. So that's what Queenie thinks about this. All right. Sorry for the confusion there. Karen L. Berry writes in, I find it interesting that the Democrats say they want due process for John Conyers, but not for Roy Moore. Cutter Wayne Leaf says, I call for a complete audit of all congressional offices. Pi W. Hackett writes in, interesting, John Conyers is very good at creating a good optic. Keep dirty laundry off the record and dispose in office slush fund with less accountability. Appear to step aside while not leaving at all and maintaining your tenure, power, and influence over all junior members. And specifically what you say, I think is important, Pi W. Hackett. I want to send out a tweet about this. I'm writing myself a note to send out a tweet after. But that Conyers stepping down, he's not stepping down permanently. He just said he's stepping down during the investigation into the House ethics investigation into these allegations. So now I guess look, someone might say, well, look, if the House ends up looking to these allegations and they say we don't think they're credible for some reason, then You might say, well, then it's reasonable for John Conyers to want to get his House ranking membership back. But you're saying you think he's just creating a good optic. You think this is what you think. You're saying you think he's good at creating a good optic. That's from Pi W. Hackett. Michael Walker writes, and Democrats will never capitulate to agreeing to a resignation for one of their own. They know it shows too much political weakness. I wish Michael Flynn would have never stepped down. Conservatives need to start playing for keeps, or we're going to lose the culture war. In my opinion, Democrats know this. Stretch Armstrong writes, there must be precision and consistency when discussing these cases. Elise from MSNBC used the word assault, but BuzzFeed used the word harassment. Also, there ought to be some kind of office that manages a record of all alleged offenses. I bet many more have been kept quiet. Now, I do agree with you, Stretch Armstrong, that a lot of times when the media discusses these cases, they're very imprecise and not careful in their language. I will say also, though, if you look at the BuzzFeed article, it does have accusations in there which to me sound like assault. There's one accusation right here where it says Representative Conyers reached over and began to caress my hand in a sexual manner. And a male employee wrote that he witnessed Conyers rub the legs and other body parts of complainant in what appeared to be a sexual manner. So that would seem to me to fall under the definition of sexual assault. I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that falls under the legal definition. But I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not 100% positive. Pi W. Hackett says, because even if you allow a junior congressman to claim to be the ranking head of the committee, I think you mean ranking head, you really are not giving up power being the ranking member. Gerald Sanford writes in, why don't they treat the accusers like police officers that shoot someone and immediately remove them and put them on leave until investigation is complete? I think what you mean is why don't they treat the people accused like they treat police officers and they put them on leave? So, I mean, one reason they might not want to do that is that if you had a policy that you put Congress people on leave as soon as they're accused of something, I could easily see people who are, who have bad intentions, just putting out accusations about a lot of Congress people on the other in the other party just to get them to step aside. It might create a very chaotic atmosphere in Congress if an accusation by whomever could result in the person being put on leave. But it sounds also like you feel, Gerald, more generally that given the seriousness of our allegations toward John Conyers, it's not being sort of dealt with seriously enough. Now, maybe that's changed today now that John Conyers has said he's stepping aside as the ranking member, at least for now, but maybe you're not satisfied with that. Beth Trojanowski says, so what about the other women in Congress? They are just as guilty. Pelosi respects him. She knew what he was doing. So is what you're saying, Beth, that you think more women in Congress should speak out about John Conyers? Maybe you think more women in Congress should speak out about John Conyers and Al Franken or other things? I'm not exactly clear, but it sounds like you want something more from women in Congress beside Nancy Pelosi. Michael Walker says, the news article you're referencing, they're using a technique that's called facts of omission. I'm not sure if you mean the BuzzFeed article or the statement by John Conyers, Michael. You said acts of omission. You corrected yourself. Garrett writes in, it would be quite a task to find someone to investigate Conyers because you never know if these investigators are perverts also. Well, I would like to think that they could find a neutral investigator who does not have a record of sexual harassment or abuse to investigate this. Garrett? I would hope that. So, you know what I forgot to do? is I forgot to open up my email here. So I just want to make sure I don't have any emails I've been neglecting. Apologies if there are. Okay, I think I'm all caught up. I think, yes. So again, we are covering the story that John Conyers, who has been accused by several of his staff members of sexual harassment of staff members, of sexual assault of staff members in terms of like things like sexual touching of them, also of misuse of taxpayer funds. A specific example being using taxpayer funds to fly in women for around the country for alleged affairs. John Conyers has today said he is stepping down, at least temporarily, as the head of the ranking member, not even the head is the highest ranking Republican. He is stepping down as the highest ranking Democratic member of the House Judiciary Committee. So he's not stepping down from the Judiciary Committee, he just will no longer be the ranking Democratic member. He says he's stepping down during the investigation as the House Ethics Committee investigates his case. So we are talking about this. We're taking your comments. If you have any comments, we're reading your comments on the air. Write to me on Twitter at Lookner, at Lookner. You can also follow me on Twitter if you like breaking news coverage. I post about breaking news throughout the day and evening, even when we're not on the air. And you can follow Right Side Broadcasting at RSB Network, at RSB Network. Thanks again to the moderators for moderating the chat today. Jazz Punk is there now. JC, Lynn Jean. Who else do we got? Barbara Braley is there. Jan is there. So thanks to all the moderators, and on the website we got Common Sense and Glenn O. You can also follow us on Facebook at Right Side Broadcasting, and on Twitter we are at RSB Network. Let's see here. So Michael Walker said, he says, in John Conyers' statement, he was referring to there was this act of omission. You said you thought the fallacy was there, but the general thing he was doing was saying that, again, these documents had reportedly been paid for by a right-wing blogger, but he wasn't clarifying that I'm guessing he didn't mean they were paid for to have them made. But you could read his statement as that if you're not familiar with the story. Anyways, I won't go there. We've covered that twice, so I won't get into all the details. You can, if you want to know what my comment there about the Mike Cernovich reference and that John Conyers made in his statement and why it might seem a little deceptive, you can rewind the broadcast and watch it. Let's see here. Somebody made a donation. Floyd Dude donated $10. Thank you, Floyd Dude. He says, hey, brother Steve, not only is there a double standard for leftist politicians like Conyers and Franken, but also the feckless media too. So you think there's been a double standard over this John Conyers stuff, it sounds like. Now you can think there's a double standard. That doesn't mean you think just saying you think there's a double standard doesn't mean you take any sort of specific position on John Conyers or Al Franken or Roy Moore. Saying you think there's a double standard just means that you think, like, look, if someone's going to take a policy on whether these people should resign or whether they should have no punishment at all until all due process has been fulfilled, you just want that applied to everyone and not just to some people and not to others. Beth Trojanowski writes, I think the women in Congress should speak out and stop what these men are doing. I referred to Pelosi flattering Conyers in an introduction of them, knowing he is a perv. Now, I will say this, Beth. One thing that Nancy Pelosi did get criticized for by some people in reference, she gave this Meet the Press interview this morning, which we showed a clip of before earlier in the broadcast. And one thing she was criticized for in that interview was that she talked about what an icon John Conyers was and praised him. And some people thought it was inappropriate for her to be doing that in an interview where they were supposed to be talking about the sexual harassment allegations. Some people thought she was like saying, well, just because of something he did in his past, we should take these allegations less seriously now or something. That's just what some people were saying. And you seem to agree with that view, Beth. Cutter Wayne Leaf says, how devious and shady do you have to be to hide the payments of a settlement like John Conyers did? How many times has he had to hide other inappropriate spending? On a scale of 1 to 10 for shadiness, this would be at least an 8. Now, I will say, Cutter Wayne Leaf, if you read this BuzzFeed article where it talks about the settlement between John Conyers' office and the accuser who worked for him, one thing they say in the article is they say this is not just a one-time thing. They say, and I apologize, yeah, we're in our backup studio, so once in a while you might hear a dog barking, and I apologize for that. So hopefully that doesn't happen that frequently. I apologize. We're not in our normal studio right now. I am visiting relatives during the Thanksgiving week. So anyways, my apologies. But what this article says is that the system, Congress has this procedure that anybody who wants to go through official channels, who works in Congress, anybody who wants to file a harassment complaint or file a discrimination complaint when they work in Congress, they have to go through this official procedure. And this procedure often ends in these settlements with non-disclosure agreements being signed. And also, you know, I won't go through the whole procedure now, but early on in the procedure, to proceed with this official procedure, the person who is filing this complaint needs to commit to non-disclosure very early on in the process to even file the procedure and to get to a possible settlement place. So what the BuzzFeed article says, and what a number of people have said over the last week or two, is that this procedure itself is designed to cover up settlements made by members of Congress in either party, in that the procedure is designed to keep these accusations from getting out into the public, and from both parties. I wonder if I can find a flow chart. Can I find that? Harassment Congress procedure flow chart. I saw a nice flow chart about what you had to do to file a claim. I don't have it handy, I'm sorry, but I saw, if you actually, I mean, you can actually read some more about it in this BuzzFeed article, but I had a really nice chart that showed each step you had to go through when you filed this procedure, when you pursue an official complaint of discrimination or harassment if you work for somebody in Congress. And again, very early on, to make your complaint even go forward, you have to agree to non-disclosure. Now, eventually, I believe you can decide to file a federal lawsuit, and at that point, I think it would become public. But if you want to do mediation and perhaps get a settlement, I believe what you have to do is agree to non-disclosure. But feel free to read up more about this. I want to see if I'll go back and see if I can find later that flow chart I had. Michael Walker says the House Ethics Committee is a joke. They never come down hard on anybody. Let's see. Stretch Armstrong says, I'm no lawyer, but how is touching someone's shoulder or holding their hand or whatever the same as grabbing them by the genitals? Those acts seem to be worlds apart, in my opinion, and I expect there to be some legal distinction. Well, I'm just saying, if you look at sexual assault, what is the definition of it? I'll show you. That's not to say they wouldn't make a distinction in terms of punishment or something. I'm not saying there's no distinction, but I believe what we were talking about is somebody had written in and said, well, why is somebody applying the word assault, or questioning why the word assault was being applied to John Conyers? And I was saying, well, there's accusation that he touched people in a sexual way, in a way that they did not want to be touched. And what I was saying is that I believe that falls under the definition of sexual assault. Here we go. This is from the Department of Justice website, and it says, what is sexual assault? Sexual assault is any type of sexual contact that occurs without the explicit consent of the recipient. And it gives some lists. So fondling is listed as one of the things there. Now, if you rub somebody's leg, could that be considered fondling? If you rub somebody's hand, I'm not an expert on this, but I could see a way of, that somebody might argue that if you rub somebody's hand a certain way with a certain feeling and intention, that could be construed as sexual contact or behavior. So at least by the definition of this, I think you could see how there could be a wide range of things that fall under this definition. As to what the case law on this is, I am not familiar with that. My point simply was, given the accusations about John Conyers, which included touching a staff member's leg in a sexual unwanted way, that I could see as, given that those were the accusations, I don't think it's unreasonable for a journalist to say that he'd been alleged to have committed sexual assault. That's all I was saying. Okay, we're going to stay on the air for a couple more minutes here, but this is Right Side Broadcasting. We are covering John Conyers stepping down, at least temporarily, as the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. I wanted to see if I can find any more news updates about this while we're on the air. I don't know if I have them. And now another thing that Nancy Pelosi is getting pushback for is she said in her interview this morning on Meet the Press, we don't know who these accusers are. But I've seen a number of people in the mainstream media, this is not a mainstream media person, but I've seen a number of people posting, no, the accusers, we do know who some of the accusers are. So for example, Josh Billinson says, Nancy Pelosi went on Meet the Press and said, the women accusing John Conyers have not really come forward. That's not true. And then the story, this is a Washington Post story, which says ethics lawyer says Conyers mistreated her during her years on Capitol Hill. And that is somebody who complained about the congressman's behavior, and she's identified by name. Now, this isn't one, I don't know, I don't believe this is one of the people, I'm not sure, I don't believe it's one of the people who the BuzzFeed story was about. So let's see, let's see what this person says. Mistreated. And now she says, this person, just to be fair, she says she did not believe she was sexually harassed by the congressman, but she did say his behavior toward her was inappropriate and abusive. So that's one accusation by somebody in public. That's not sexual harassment, however, and I don't know if so the question is, Nancy Pelosi said, we don't know who these accusers are. Was she talking specifically about the sexual harassment accusers, and have any of them come forward? I saw another tweet by someone who said, yeah, one of the accusers has come forward. Let me see if I can find this. Yeah, so this might be the same person, but Elizabeth Landers from CNN said one ex-staffer spoke to CNN on camera and said Conyers verbally abused her. Although Nancy Pelosi, when she said, I don't know who the accusers are, might have been talking about the sexual harassment accusers or the accusers about misusing public funds. Anyway, so she got some blowback from her saying, I don't know who the accusers are, but some question as to whether she deserved that blowback for saying that. Camilla Zapolsky says, I believe unwanted touching of a person can be defined as assault. I'm not sure about exact definition of sexual assault. Keep up the great work, Steve. Thank you, Camilla, for watching and for your kind words. Beth Trojanowski writes in, two things. Conyers has been in Congress for a long time. He knows the dirt on a lot of people. Fondling like what Biden does to little girls' hair. Well, I don't know if any kind of Biden touching little girl's hair counts as fondling as a legal definition. I'm not an expert on that, so I can't speak to that. Cutter Wayne Leaf says, from what you said, then to me, all of Congress is inherently shady, just in the fact that they have such a procedure in place. Yeah, so a number of people have complained about this procedure Congress has in place for dealing with employees' harassment and discrimination claims, and says this procedure is a way of keeping these allegations quiet. And even Chuck Todd said to Nancy Pelosi in the clip we showed of her interview, a number of people have asked for this procedure to be changed. Ace Trades made a donation. Thanks, Ace Trades. Ace Trades says, you are great, RSBN. Keep up the good work, Ace. Thank you, Ace. Those donations are what keeps us on the air. Those donations are what allows us to come on and cover this today. I'm guessing. So we've been on the air, I'd say about, 40 minutes or something. I'm guessing if you watched MSNBC, CNN, and Fox for the last couple hours, if they reported on this, they did a few minutes on it, but they certainly didn't do this kind of full treatment on it like we're doing. I don't think so. When I checked like an hour ago or so, they weren't even covering it. But we like being able to do this coverage for you and to take your comments on the air and talk about these things at length. But the way we can do that is you guys donate to us, because you guys support us. We can't stay on the air without your donations. So if you want to donate, go to the bottom of the YouTube chat, click on the $ at the bottom of the YouTube chat, or go to rsbn.tv/donate, rsbn.tv/donate. Let's see here. Termites, thank you. Termites wrote that he was getting an error. He or she was getting an error on our live stream. We appreciate when you let us know about that, because we can then tell YouTube about that. Now, I haven't seen widespread reports of this, but I'll keep an eye out for that, and I'll let my boss Joe know about that after. Termites, thank you. Cutter Wayne Leaf says, what do the moderators do in the chat room? Well, the moderators are really important, because the moderators, sometimes on chats and YouTube, you get trolls who just want to disrupt the chat and just be disruptive. They prevent that from happening. They try to, not let, sometimes people want to come in and just tweet and just send things out, send messages that are really, really offensive to a lot of people. And they want to keep the chat a friendly, safe place to have an exchange of ideas. That's really what they want to do. That's their chief goal in there. It can be hard in political discussions, sometimes people come in just to stir up trouble. So they just want to have it be a place where it's pleasant. It's a pleasant, safe place to have a discussion. We really appreciate it. They volunteer their time, so we really thank all the moderators for doing that. And if you ever have questions about what the moderators do, you can ask what moderators. You can also message Jude, our chief moderator, at moderator at rsbn.tv. Moderator at rsbn.tv. Also, she is at rsbn moderator on Twitter, at rsbn moderator. So you can always ask her or one of the other moderators about chat-related stuff. And also on our website, Glenn O and Common Sense are the moderators there. Stretch Armstrong says, just to further clarify, I can 100% see how what is alleged could make someone uncomfortable, which is unacceptable in a workplace. Also, there's a big difference between grabbing someone's calf, upper knee, or butt, etc. I'm getting tired of watching all these stories. Yeah, now I'm guessing if there was a legal proceeding, what actually was done might factor into the actual legal proceeding. Say, for example, what kind of punishment was called, what kind of punishment is called for, that kind of thing. So I don't think, just because the definition of sexual assault contains a lot of different things doesn't mean they're all going to be treated exactly the same, I don't believe, in a legal proceeding. Or in a proceeding like in the House of Representatives, in their ethics committee. Rick says about the John Conyers saying he'll step down as the ranking member. He says, it's a dog and pony show. Look at my right hand while Al Franken skates. All right. I think at this point, we have gotten to all of the messages that people wrote in. I believe we have. So I think at this point we're going to wrap up this stream of coverage on John Conyers stepping down as the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. If there's more breaking news this weekend, we will definitely come on the air and cover it. So subscribe to us on YouTube and click the notifications bell so you get notified when we come on the air. Also, you can follow us on Facebook, Right Side Broadcasting on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at RSB Network. I'll be posting about breaking news all the rest of the weekend, as I always do. If I hear more on this story, I'll post about it. I am at Lookner on Twitter, at Lookner. Thank you for the donors for donating to us. Those donations are what allow us to come on the air and do these broadcasts. So if you want to support Right Side Broadcasting, go to the bottom of the YouTube chat, click on the little dollar sign at the bottom of the YouTube chat, or you can go to rsbn.tv/donate, rsbn.tv/donate. And thank you so much to all of our moderators for moderating throughout the broadcast. Barbara Braley, Jan, JC, Lynn Jean was there, I believe. Jan. Who else? Who am I forgetting? Somebody was there before. I can't remember. I'm missing somebody, and their name has disappeared. Well, I tried to get to all of you. Common Sense and Gleno on the website. Thank you for saying thanks in the chat room. Susan Reynolds, Light Switch, Remain Faithful, Count Chocula, Music World, Shane Taylor, and everybody else there in the chat room. Thank you so much. And I think I forgot to say something else. I can't remember, though. Oh, and Karen L. Berry sent in a comment saying he denied the allegations about what the settlement was for. Yeah, in his statement today, John Conyers does deny the allegations that are made against him in those signed documents that were submitted to the Office of Compliance by several of his employees. And some more people saying thanks in the chat room. Becca, Gasoline, Beamer Boy, Remain Faithful. Remain Faithful posted an emoji of bacon for the dog. Thank you. And Whiskey Bay, thank you. All right, we're going to wrap this up now. If there's more breaking news later today, tonight, we'll come on the air and cover it for you. So keep an eye out for Right Side Broadcasting. In the meantime, we hope you have a great day and a great rest of your weekend. And I'm sure there will be, so tomorrow's Monday. We're back from Thanksgiving, so I'm sure we'll start seeing the White House press briefings and all that stuff. We'll be covering all of those too. But for now, I am Steve Lookner for Right Side Broadcasting. Thank you for joining us for this live coverage, and have a great rest of your day.